You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
What a beautiful day for horses in the morning.
You are listening to the #1 horse podcast in the world. Here is your entertaining look at the horse world and the people in it.
I'm Julie Broadway, president of the American Horse Council.
And I'm Emily Stearns, Health, Welfare, and Regulatory Affairs Liaison for the American Horse Council.
And you are listening to the special monthly American Horse Council episode of Horses in the Morning on the Horse Radio Network for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Good morning, Horse World.
It's time to hear from the American Horse Council in this monthly episode of Horses in the Morning.
Thank you for tuning in this morning, and welcome back, Emily. Emily, where were you last month exactly?
Thanks, Julie. Glad to be back. Last month, I was with other members of the National Institute of Animal Agriculture, NIAA, down in Atlanta at the Center for Disease Control. And we were engaging in listening sessions and kind of group meetings on behalf of the equine industry and kind of the larger world of animal ag. And the goal was to educate both kind of CDC staff and researchers on what support animal agriculture needs to ensure the health of our animals and the health of our people, and to learn about what programming CDC has in place. And just for fun, we also got to tour the CDC museum that's open to the public. And we also got to see the labs where they do all sorts of sample testing to keep people safe.
Wow, that sounds like a really great trip. So anything you want to share about that you was kind of a takeaway?
Yeah, there was actually a ton of cool programming out there. So they have a youth education initiative for livestock handling practices at fairs and expos. This came out of a swine flu outbreak at a 4-H expo a couple years ago. So they put together all this really good educational material to keep kids healthy. And they also have these programs for employee health and wellness for agriculture workers, which I think is really important to us. And one thing in that program that caught my eye was a Lyme disease prevention kind of outreach initiative for ag workers, which I know is something here in the Northeast we really keep an eye on in the horse world with a lot of ticks up here. But really, it's all in our most recent newsletter. So check out the most recent American Horse Council newsletter because I shared everything in detail there.
Yeah, and folks, if you're not subscribing to our newsletter, it's free for an individual AHC member as part of your membership. And so you should join today, and you can find out all about some of this cool CDC programming that Emily heard all about.
And this wasn't in the newsletter, but as a science nerd, we heard them talking about building a special super secure lab for space germs that NASA is going to be bringing back from Mars.
Oh, wasn't that a movie? That's a little scary. Oh. Today's episode is brought to you by the American Horse Council's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. We love horses because they give us the power to unlock our own power. We want to invite all people to connect with their adventurous spirit, empower them to embark on a journey of self-discovery with the horse as their partner, sharing that passion with others by inviting people of all backgrounds to experience the power of horses will create a greater sense of belonging for all horse lovers and build a stronger, more sustainable equine industry. Today's episode is on inclusion in the ag and equine industry and the equestrian community. To thrive, industries and communities need to unlock the power and potential of all types of talent, and that means they need to be inclusive. Inclusion means everyone feels welcome, respected, valued, included, and that they belong. Today's episode is going to explore some ways that the ag, equine, and equestrian community is striving to be more inclusive. And we have a great panel. So, Emily, would you introduce our panelists?
Yes, I'd love to. So today, our panel includes Kathy Alm, CEO at Path International. We have author Karen for Usher. And then we also have Kendall Cornelius with the University of New Hampshire Extension. So welcome, everybody.
Hi, this is Karen. I'm really happy to be here.
And this is Kathy. I appreciate the invitation and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Looking forward to everything.
This is Kendall. Thank you all so much for inviting me here today. I'm really excited to chat with you and learn from you.
Right. Well, I called this the K team when we started putting this together, not knowing we were going to have Kendall, Karen, and Kathy, but that's how it sort of worked out. And then we added a fourth player into this. So we're excited about the conversation today. So I'm going to ask each of you to begin by taking just a few minutes to introduce yourself, just a brief introduction, and tell us what your organization or you yourself are doing in the DEI space. So I'm going to start with Kathy.
And how long do I have, Julie?
Take a minute or two. You got a lot to talk about.
Okay, exactly. That's why I asked. So I am with the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International, and we set the standards and credential individuals to provide equine assisted services, the various different types of services that incorporate equines into providing life-changing opportunities for individuals as they work with therapist or therapeutic riding instructor, and also, of course, with our very wonderful equine partners. PATH International has been doing a lot in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. We have a vision and a specific part of our strategic plan is DEI focused with goals and objectives. We have a DEI committee that is working through those goals and objectives. So the DEI committee includes both members and certificates as well as PATH International staff, and looking at our various goals and working through them one by one. And that it is essentially, our vision is to diversify and be more inclusive, invite more differing perspectives and individuals into the PATH International space, both as service providers as well as members of our association to participate in the industry. We have been working hard in this space because where we started, and we started this in 2021, I believe, and where we started was just doing a survey and kind of figuring out what our space currently looked like. And the data that we collected said that 92% of our service providers and members were identified themselves as Caucasian. So only 8% were a different ethnicity or race and background. And that many of our service providers were serving underrepresented populations, people with disabilities, as well as people from different cultural backgrounds. And we recognized the fact that it was really important to diversify who was providing the service so that the participants coming in to receive the services were able to connect and feel welcome and inclusive. And so that's part of what our vision is and part of the why. We also learned a lot about how many individuals from marginalized and underrepresented communities had not felt welcome in the equine space. And they were doing some of this work, but they were doing it in silos. And so we wanted to open it up and find a way to be more connected and supporting each other. Julie, do you want me to jump right into the helmet information, or do you want that to come later?
We'll circle back around to that, but I'm really intrigued. Okay. You guys are going to hear Kathy talk a little bit about not only what they've done internally as far as their members and their organization, but also taking a look at the people that their centers serve and the diversity of that population, which is very broad and very deep. So there's a lot of interesting conversations to have around that. Kendall, tell us a little about yourself and what you have been doing in the DEI space.
Great. So I'm going to start off by saying I am a proud graduate from the University of New Hampshire Equine program. So even though I work in a more dedicated agriculture space with an extension, my heart still lies with all of my horse folks. So this was a really exciting opportunity for me to get back to my equine roots. So I'm just jamming over here and I'm like celebrating being with everyone and hearing about more efforts in this current space. So at the University of New Hampshire, we do have a dedicated women in agriculture program. So I am coordinating that program currently. And that for us looks a little bit more like hands-on skill building at the moment. So we do offer things like business support, financial aid in the sense of like going through folks' business numbers, but truly the heart of the program that I'm trying to build includes a sense of community for all folks who are interested in being part of the Women in Ag program. But I love teaching the hands-on skill piece most specifically. So this is things like tractor safety and operation. We also teach maintenance, so things like greasing, oil changes, cleaning the air filter, tire, like whatever you want to think of in terms of tractor safety, we're there for it. I also teach truck and trailer driving. So I love doing these specific truck and trailer workshops for women because I hear a lot about the tension between them and maybe their family members, their partners trying to back up a trailer. And anything that we can do to help equip women with safe skills and communication skills to bring their horses anywhere they want to go is something I'm totally there for. And I also teach things like chainsaw safety and operation and maintenance for women. So we offer a lot of those skills that are typically thought of as for, like, I'm going to put air quotes, for a man to be doing, but we're really breaking down that barrier. And we do this by honoring the fact that we know women have unique challenges in the ag world. So this is everything from they are having a hard time making a Saturday workshop because they can't get chore coverage or childcare. So the way that I run our truck and trailer workshops is it's a 2-hour time slot, and you can pick anything from 8 in the morning all the way down to 3:30 to 5 o'clock at night. So if you only have 2 hours during the day, you can't take a whole day to devote to a workshop. We are being equitable and inclusive by offering you a better option so that we can make sure that we can get you to a workshop by honoring the fact that we know you have other things going on in your life. So, I also think of diversity, equity, inclusion in terms of the way that we structure our programming, so the way that we format agendas. I'm almost done with my master's degree in educational studies, and that has greatly impacted the way that I choose to make sure that we are embedding DEI in our extension events. And for me, this looks like neuroequity. So I make sure that I have a diverse array of the ways that we are conveying information and knowledge so that if I have a broad base of learners, there's something there that will hit on all of those various preferences or preferred learning styles.
Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, we're going to have some more conversation around all of that. I've never heard that phrase. You said neuroequity. Neuroequity. Okay, that's a new one for me.
Yeah.
Going to explore that a little bit. So Karen, thanks for joining this. Karen and I have a long-standing relationship over quite a bit of content that she's been crafting, and she intrigued me with some recent articles she'd been writing about different ways that we should embrace people in the equestrian community. So Karen, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
So I'm a writer and a journalist. On the reporting side, I've most recently been doing some freelance reporting for The Horse, writing about horse health, and most recently, coming up soon, I don't know when it's publishing, but there'll be a story about horse care costs, which I connected with Julie on. I'm also in the process of launching a newsletter for the Michigan horse community. That'll be called the Michigan Hoofbeat. And I have blogged for the Plaid Horse and the Chronicle of the Horse about plus size rider experiences, which is really why I'm here today to talk about size inclusion in the horse industry. I am very uncomfortable with the idea of having an agenda because as a journalist, we try so hard not to. But when I blog about my experiences, I do try to remember that I get to be a person first and that I don't have to argue against my own inclusion. If I were to have like a bucket list of things that would happen by the time I'm done with the equestrian world, when I'm in the grave, I would hope that we have bigger bounding blocks, and that we would have more safety equipment that is maybe like modular or adaptable or just like flat out comes in a bigger size. I would love to just be able to buy a chest protector right off the shelf that fits me. And helmets.
And that's going to take us right to circle back to Kathy, because that's been the thing that I've been so intrigued with. Kathy's facilities often have individuals that have very specific needs as it relates to helmets. And so Path International's been doing quite a bit of research and speaking with helmet manufacturers about how we meet all those needs. So Kathy, talk a little bit about what you guys heard and where you are with that.
Sure. We participated in a couple of town halls that included helmet manufacturers as well as interested parties. We also did a survey specific to helmets and the fit of helmets around protected hairstyles, and that there wasn't anything that, if braids, for example, or hijabs, head coverings, they don't fit in the helmets in a way that continues to be safe, as well as for some people with disabilities with an overly large head or really, really tiny head. And so we identified this problem came to our attention, and we started conversations with helmet manufacturers to try to see what could be done, because it's been kind of ignored, because from the helmet business perspective, it's like, oh, there's not much of an audience there. There's not much of a market there. And the reality is there's a much bigger market than I think the helmet manufacturers realized. And so we have been working with, in particular, for example, Charles Owen, about how we can make helmets fit and how we can make that accessible and not horrifically expensive, just because they have to modify the helmet in order to fit over a protected hairstyle and still be safe.
Karen, go.
Yeah, I want to shout out to Charles Owen, because my head is normal sized. The rest of my body is larger, but my head is kind of flat in some areas. And so I've always had a really hard time finding a helmet that fits me properly. And Charles Owen was the only manufacturer that I reached out to that was actually willing to talk me through it and try to find a solution for me. And that's one of the things that I think is important about size inclusion, and is that we find ways to realize that every human body is a little bit different. And then you start to notice all of the ways in which so many people are excluded, particularly in the safety issue. I hear that a lot in the comments when I write about being a plus size rider. Like, somebody's always saying, oh, if there was a place for it in the market, the product would exist. And that's not true when it comes to safety equipment. If there's not a helmet that fits you shouldn't get on a horse. And so, if there's not a helmet that fits you, then lots of people aren't going to be able to ride. And the same thing with protective vests. You don't see tons and tons of plus size riders on the cross country course, because most places have rules about not being able to ride cross country without wearing a body protector.
I think that safety is a great point too. And Kendall, we'll kick it to you here, but I got involved with the UNA, one of the women tractor driving classes. And my first time learning to drive tractor was in college. And the guy, I was shoveling stalls, up the street. And the guy there was so nice and offered to teach me to drive the 60 horsepower tractor. I couldn't reach the clutch. I couldn't get the seat close enough to the pedals. He could not fathom the idea that A, I couldn't reach the clutch, or B, how to problem solve this. And the community in the women's tractor driving class was like, oh, no, there's no problem. And different type of tractor. But I'm bringing it up because in terms of safety, and I'm sure Kendall will love to talk about this, is that so many aspects of safety are designed for one type of person or based on one type of person, and kind of unintentionally excludes all these other people. So safety is a really big thing to be considering. Kendall, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So first of all, I love that we're having this conversation about inclusion in safety, because everyone has a right to be safe. That's not a privilege. That's not something that's earned or deserved. That's a right. So I think it's so wonderful that we're having a discussion that kind of gets at the heart of one of the issues that I commonly see in the agriculture industry, is the fact that equipment is not always designed ergonomically for women. So our body shape is just different in the sense that we have a wider pelvis dimension. Like you were saying, Emily, some of us are just a little bit smaller. And yeah, that's one of the things I have to think of when I'm hosting workshops is, am I able to access a tractor that has ergonomic features that allow the steering column to come down, that slide up close enough so that everyone can reach the pedals. And then also in the opposite direction. So I'm 5'8" and I'm broadly built. So I also have a hard time keeping in my own mind that the equipment that fits me does not fit everyone I'm going to be teaching. So when I'm teaching chainsaw safety, I have a forestry helmet. So in the same kind of thing, it's a little different than an equine helmet, but in the way I have to fit it, in the way I have to do my hair, and the way that I kind of explain to participants too, like how do you adjust it with like the knob in the back. And that's everything from like pitchforks too, so like being able to shorten up a handle if you have someone who's really like shorter stature so that they're not leveraging as much weight on the end of that pitchfork as a tall person would be. So safety comes in so many different forms, and so it's the helmets, but it's also ergonomic, like body protection too, that I think is so important to keep in mind.
And there's another layer for centers that are offering equine assisted services, because unlike maybe competition where somebody's going to own their own helmet because they also are working with a horse 5 days a week or 6 days a week, centers have an array of helmets that all of their participants are using. And so it's that much more challenging for them to make sure that they've got a variety enough of helmets that are going to fit these different needs to keep people safe. And the other piece to this, especially around the protected hairstyle, of it's not okay to tell somebody that they have to change their hairstyle or they have to not wear their hijab in order to be able to ride. That's not okay. We need to be coming at it from the other direction of what can we do? What can the helmet manufacturers do to create helmets that make these services accessible to everyone?
Part of the fun of being a human, right? Like, here's a problem, we get to solve it. Like, we get to solve problems, and that's fun. We shouldn't be like digging our heels in and being like, no, it has to remain the way it's been for a couple decades now with helmets. Like, we can solve this problem.
So I have to tell you guys, when Karen and I first started talking about this subject of inclusivity of larger built people in the equestrian space, I had a personal experience. Let me tell you my story simply. It doesn't apply necessarily to people in different ways. So I once took a riding clinic, and I'm 5'6", and I'm going to confess I'm 130 pounds. And I went through the entire clinic, and at the end, the clinician pulled my trainer over and said, would she be offended if I told her she needed to lose 20 pounds because she needs to look thinner when she's showing this horse? And I was like, and the trainer said, no, that's not appropriate. You can't say that to her. But it really struck me, Karen, that what the clinician was trying to say is when you're in center ring and you're showing a horse, that sometimes judges have a vision of what they're looking for as far as the rider and its proportion to the horse that they're showing. And so she had in her mind how she thought that picture ought to look. And I was really shocked by that. And it made me think about this conversation about how we needed to be more inclusive of people of all different shapes and sizes in our community.
I think one thing we talk a lot about too, Julie, especially on the tails of our economic impact study, is how do we keep growing the industry and how do we keep getting kids in the industry? And the answer is just to make sure they can all participate. It's really not that hard of an answer, right? Just make sure everybody can participate. And that's how you keep selling helmets. And that's how you keep your horse show entries up.
Kendall.
Called psychological safety. Yeah.
And
so like that's one of the biggest pillars of our Women in Ag program, is that I guarantee that anyone who takes our programming, I'm going to make this broad, anyone, has a safe space. So that means that there's enough instructors to keep you safe while you're learning a risky skill, but we want you to take risks. We want you to fail and then succeed. But we also want you to feel safe when you're doing that. And that means we're supportive. We're not ever going to say like, don't ride that horse or don't sit on that tractor, or like that's kind of, I'm really saddened and shocked to hear your story, but I also think that that's an important point to talk about, is how are we able to help make our learning opportunities psychologically safe for those people who are in attendance.
And Kendall, I think that's really important also for marginalized or underrepresented communities.
Hugely. Yeah.
That it is safe to come receive services there, or it is safe to come learn about how to be an instructor, or how to incorporate therapy practice, and that I think in particular, well, not in particular, but I think about the members of the LGBTQ plus community who over and over we hear stories of how they don't feel safe. And so it is that psychological safety is a really important component.
I think this is where we can also just add the adage that representation matters. So not only does it matter in terms of placing, like part of the reason why that clinician thought Julie looked too big is maybe they were used to seeing thinner people on this particular type of horse. So, broader experiences in a more diverse community on horseback gives judges a different idea of what good can look like.
And I wonder if the phenomenon, sorry, Julie, I'm going to just kind of touch on this. I wonder if that's also a phenomenon, thinking back to my time lessons, is like trusting your trainer to put you on a horse that you're not going to be overfaced with, right? Like there's a reason why we all have those schoolmasters that are happy to poke along on a lunge line and tote the kid around and do the things, like great. But there's a time for a challenge and there's a time to push forward, but there's also a time to really recognize when there's, in the name of safety and good learning, practices should be reassessed. So Karen, what you were saying just totally made me think about that, to kind of connect it all back together.
Don't even get me started on all the tiny kids that think huge horses are so cool. And then they whine, and then they get instructors to be like, okay, fine, you can ride the big horse, but then the big horse has already been used when the person that actually needs a big horse wants to ride. And so then there's no horse available for the bigger rider. There used to be an element in showing of suitability of rider to horse. And sometimes I think that's not true anymore. Or maybe I'm just jealous.
No, and I also think of the horse's safety. I really enjoy the fact that it sounds like there's better rules in terms of I don't want to say using illegal substances for horses, but when does the safety of the horse come into play? When they're being overused because of just that phenomenon that you're saying, Karen, everyone wants to ride this horse. So how do we help discern what is appropriate use of the horse, and how does that also keep the rider safe too?
When I was teaching lessons back in a former life, I had a 7-year-old who was just learning to post the trot on this perfectly sized tiny little pony. And she looked at me at the end of her lesson and she goes, when am I going to be able to stand on the back and run? And I was like, what? She's like, who is it? Clint Anderson or something. She's like, how do I stand on the back and run? And I was like, I don't think we have a horse for that.
Oh my God. I want to circle back and ask all of you to share with us what you think the industry needs to do to make everyone feel welcome. What are the couple of ideas that you want to put out there into the universe that you think we would need to take on as an industry? To Emily's point, the reason the American Horse Council is hosting this conversation today is because we need more people to get involved in our industry. And one of the ways to do that is to be more inclusive, as she said. So we're curious, what else can the industry do to make people feel welcome? Education
of the trainers, education of the service providers, education for individuals to understand their biases, to understand that they're looking, to Julie, your story, that they're looking at a rider through their own lens, their own biases. And if they don't recognize them, then they are going to not be welcoming, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And I think that's one of the things that I know it's one of the things that we're focusing at Path International is helping people to understand how they are in the world that could push people away, could not be inclusive, how their perspective, what they've always known and understood, isn't the only perspective, is not the only way to look at something, and that being inclusive is not just about saying, oh no, we welcome everybody, anybody can come to our center. Being inclusive is not just inviting people, but then actually asking them to participate, actually understanding what their perspective is and what the barriers they're experiencing to help break down those barriers.
Okay. Anybody else thoughts you have about what we can do?
I want to jump on that, Kathy. That same train, Extension did an interesting workshop not so long ago about unwrapping implicit bias. And one of the most fascinating things that the speaker was saying is that actually bias is taught. We are not initially born with biases. We pick those up, whether it's subconsciously through visuals or everything we hear as kids growing up. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about follow through on that, make good on that offer to be accommodating. So I think industry wide, the follow through is the important piece is what I'd say. And we do say that on our workshops, like we are more than happy to make reasonable accommodations as best we can to make sure that folks who want to come to the workshop are able to.
Erin, you got any other comments you want to share?
Oh, yes. I muted my mic so that I could type up my list here. So as for size inclusion for riders, first and foremost, we have to have better research on rider size and how it affects horses. And that research needs to include context, like whether it's better for riders to have, like heavier riders to have shorter periods of ride. There's got to be a line somewhere where it's not you can't ride at all, but like maybe you need to take more breaks or ride for shorter periods of time, or maybe this horse really is just walk in canter sound, because trotting, some researchers say that trotting is actually harder on the horse. That sort of thing. I'll reiterate, bigger, sturdy mounting blocks, not these narrow, lightweight, top-heavy ones, like the 4-step mounting blocks that are like skinny and lightweight and just topple over if you wiggle on them at all. Like, no, we need things made out of wood, maybe on wheels with a bar so you can move it around so you're not always mounting the horse in the same part of the arena, but like bigger mounting blocks, better for the riders, better for the horse. If you are a riding instructor and you have a website, do outright on your website whether you have weight restrictions, and also state what your plan might be if your one size tolerant horse is sick or lame or at a show. Sales horses, when horses are for sale, nobody ever says how much the horse weighs, probably because nobody really has a good idea, like that we're all just trying to tape and maybe we're taping wrong. But there are other indicators of whether a horse can be good weight carriers, such as the size of their hoof, how wide their cannon bone is. You could even like talk about like their proportions, like whether they've got a long back, a short back, because photos are tricky. Like they can be positioned poorly and not have a really good idea of what that horse is capable of doing. Obviously, I still care about helmets. They need to fit different hair types. They need to fit different skull shapes. Body size protectors, I would love if there was more diversity there in the sizes that are being offered. And that also extends to boots. Not only do I have like a wider calf, but I also have a wider foot. And a lot of equestrian boots don't come in a wider size or have any arch support, which is baffling to me when you consider how many miles you put in on the showground sometimes. My last step recorder for the last show I was at said that I walked like 5 miles. So I would love to have more options for diversity and foot and calf types.
I think, yeah, just more options for everything everywhere, right? Like, it doesn't matter if we're looking at physical features or cultural things that need to be accommodated for that. Just more options for everybody everywhere, I think, is what the main takeaway is. And that's how we get as many people as possible participating and welcomed into the barn, right, Julie?
That's right. We're so pleased to have had this panel today. You will find their contact information in the show notes when the podcast goes up. And for those of you that are out there and you're kind of processing all this conversation today, please know that the American Horse Council's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force is always happy to hear about ways we can continue to welcome and invite all people that love horses into our barns and into our lives. So thank you, panelists. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I was really excited to be here.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome to talk and learn from you all.
Great opportunity. It's great when American Horse Council brings different perspectives together and on these important topics. So thank you.
So this upcoming legislative update segment is brought to you by Piranha. Whether on the back of a horse, at the barn, or watching from the sidelines, there is nothing more annoying than a flying insect. Family owned, made in the USA, and with over 50 years of experience, you can count on Piranha, your trusted leader in insect control, to keep those pests at bay. It works. And Emily, a good segue from that is to tell the audience, if they haven't heard, that we're doing some research on fly and insect uses.
Yes. So we just finished up an owner survey to figure out what owners are using for fly control out there. So we do have some federal regulation coming out, hopefully this fall. We've been told this fall for the past 2 years, so we'll see what happens. But we are trying to understand how any potential regulation on things like fly spray might impact the industry. So we just closed up an owner survey, and we are getting ready to survey event venues. So if you run a horse show out there somewhere, keep an eye out. You might be getting an email from us to let us know how you're using fly control options.
Thanks, Emily. So we're really pleased today to have some folks with us from the United States Equestrian Federation. They're going to give us an update on the recent Paralympics. I watched with great interest at how well the teams performed. It's a great event. So if you would, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about what your role is at the United States Equestrian Federation and a little bit about Paralympics.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. My name is Hallie Griffin. I am the director of FEI Sport for U.S. Equestrian. For those of you that don't know, U.S. Equestrian is the governing body for equestrian sport within the United States. So we govern national breeds and disciplines as well as international disciplines. And that's really where my role kicks in, is working with our 7 internationally recognized disciplines of dressage, eventing, jumping, para-dressage, driving, vaulting, and endurance. So those are in my wheelhouse. And I was very fortunate to work with our para-dressage team that just came back from the 2024 Paris Paralympics, where the equestrian took place in Versailles, which was about 45 minutes outside of Paris. But was a fantastic venue and served for a very exciting Paralympic Games, where we took home and broke some of our own records, but brought home 7 medals in total, including 5 gold medals, as well as an individual bronze and an individual silver. So we are extremely proud of our Paralympic team and our Paralympic program, which has been working very hard these last years.
So what are you looking forward to the most about Los Angeles? Because it won't be long before it'll be here. You've got some new players in the pipeline out there that you're bringing on to possibly take a position on the team?
I'm so glad you asked about LA. Immediately following a games, it's always what we can do better. How are we going to grow? What are our goals for the next quadrennial as we go into the next 4 years? And with the home games on the horizon, there's a lot of excitement. And of course, there's going to be a lot of expectations. Of course, we're going to aim for big things. We're going to aim for those top podiums for both the teams and for the individuals. But I think we all feel LA's, coming on us. I'm actually looking outside my office now, where there's a countdown clock counting down the number of days. So we're very aware of the upcoming home games, but I would say overall, we're really also using our momentum that has gained from this last Paralympics to help grow the Paralympic and the para-dressage participation. It's a huge opportunity right now to highlight the successes of our athletes and show and demonstrate people how they can get involved in para-dressage, and which there's a whole myriad of ways through the U.S. Para Equestrian Association, as well as the U.S. Dressage Federation and our centers of excellence. I had the fortune to just listen in on your last segment where Kathy Alm spoke from PATH International as well, and they have provided some great resources and ways for people to come more connected with the para-dressage movement.
Well, I know it's not inexpensive to mount a team to go to the Olympics. What could the industry do to help further support that effort, to make them successful?
Well, I would say a way to support the paradressage and the success of the paradressage team for the next 4 years is, of course, there's ways to give and be part of, if someone wanted to make a financial contribution, we have the U.S. Equestrian Team Foundation. That is our organization that leads up on the fundraising efforts. There's also a foundation through the USPEA where people can make contributions. But I would say, come out and support us. We have events that happen. There's international level events that happen in our country at various venues. We also have our centers of excellence, which are ways, and that's where a lot of our classification happens now. It's an area where athletes can go, they can get classified. We're trying to create more opportunities for people to be recognized and seen through these centers of excellence. So there's a myriad of ways. They can also call USCF, and we're happy to talk to them if they want to get involved.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing more as we get closer to LA.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We'll provide more information, links, again, in the show notes. We invite you to support our beloved industry and join the American Horse Council. Get a free subscription to our monthly newsletter, which shares the latest in all the legislative happenings, federal, state, as well as more information that horse owners like you need to know.
And follow the American Horse Council on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can also subscribe to this podcast's RSS feed. You can subscribe to Horses in the Morning on any podcast player and find all the shows, including ours, on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
And as we always like to say, we are #here for horses and everybody who wants to be involved in our industry. Thank you.